Well, my name is Sara Baldwin. I'm a senior policy associate with an organization called Utah Clean Energy. Quick raise of hands if you've heard of us before. Good. Well, this would be the crowd that would happen, so thanks. So, for those who aren't familiar, our organization is a nonprofit, and we work to do three things. We work to stop energy waste, we work to create clean energy, and we work to build a smart energy future. And you can find us in all the normal internet and social media locations, and encourage you to pay close attention to our work. We do a lot of work in the policy arena. It is a miracle that I'm here today. The legislative session is still happening, and I've been up there pretty much nonstop for the past 4 weeks. But it's a pleasure to be here and not there. Let me say that. We do a lot of work in the utility regulatory arena, where a lot of our decisions are made as it relates to our energy future and our utility decision making. Anyone in the room with utility? Okay. And we work a lot with businesses and local governments and other nonprofits. We really focus on partnership as being the core of our work, working with the state government, federal government, you name it. We recognize that our mission to advance a cleaner, more efficient energy economy is not going to happen because we wanted to, but because we engage and enroll all of you as part of that process. So thanks for your interest. And if you have interest in a partnership with us, please be in touch. So the best part about presenting on solar is you have awesome visuals. And so, wanting to know what's on our horizon today, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the state of solar today. In fact, it's really timely because a report just came out yesterday that has a lot of really juicy information. It's very up to date. I'm going to talk a little bit about a few tools that we've been working on as an organization to make solar simple. And then ending with a bit of a broader discussion about how solar is going to become even more mainstream as we go forward. Okay, so this is from that report I mentioned. This was conducted by the Solar Energy Industry Association and a group called GTM Research. This is their 2013, so last year, Market Insight Report. So this is the latest and greatest of solar in the United States. So as you can see, we had a huge increase from the total installed electrical capacity relative to 2012. Solar was second behind natural gas in overall capacity installed. I've been doing this for 10 years, and this is huge. I mean, this says to me that not only is this happening, but this is happening very quickly, and you're either, I don't want to say with us or against us, but solar is going to stay. And that is a message that I hope you all take with you today to the naysayers that you may speak with. Your Uncle Bob, for example. I have an Uncle Bob who says, it's never going to happen. And I said, well, actually, Uncle Bob, it is happening. So 2013 was an unprecedented year for solar. In fact, we saw more solar installed in the last 18 months than in the last 30 years. So again, big deal. And to put that in perspective of monetary value, which we all, of course, care about $13.7 billion in the market value of that PV. Now, to put it in a little bit more perspective, Bill Gates is worth about $76 billion, so we're not quite there yet. Warren Buffett, about $58 billion, but we're getting close. We're in the billions instead of the millions, so that's the good news. Now, of course, this growth would not be happening without price declines. And for those who've been following the solar conversation over the years, cost has been the primary barrier. Well, I'm pleased to say that that barrier is quickly eroding. And as you can see with this graph, 2013 saw the lowest average weighted prices for PV, photovoltaic, than ever before, and it's around $2.59 per watt. And that's a weighted average among the residential, non-residential, and utility. So this is your residential, non-residential, and utility scale. And to break that down even further, looking at each of those sectors, residential still remains the most expensive relative to the others. Non-residential, commercial, is very much in the money these days. And utility scale, frankly, is very cost competitive with natural gas resources. It's, in most cases, more competitive than new coal. It's competitive with wind. It's competitive with a lot of other resources. So solar is now being integrated into utility portfolios. And that, to us as consumers who want to know what's happening when we flip on the light switch, matters. So we should be pleased that this is becoming more cost-effective for our utilities. And it's also becoming more cost-effective for us as homeowners and as businesses. So a quick glance at who's leading the charge and who's really making this happen. Well, no surprise here, California. They have been for a long time. They definitely are the lion's share of the market in the United States. But some interesting other contenders: New Jersey. Don't really think of solar when you think of New Jersey. At least I don't. Massachusetts, certainly Arizona. That's a no-brainer relative to their solar resource. North Carolina. That's a kind of a new one. Hawaii, and Utah's finally on this little map, which I'm excited about. Just to clarify, the fact that these states don't have anything in them is not because they don't have solar, it's because this is an excerpt from a full report that costs money, and this is a part of the executive summary. So if you want details on every one of these states, you can go check out the executive summary at sia.org. So some quick factoids to put these into perspective. So the amount of solar that will be installed in 2014 in Arizona will save enough water to fill 25,000 swimming pools. So in a place like Arizona, which has a lot of swimming pools and yet not a lot of water, that's a good deal. In the state of Texas, which is known for bigger, better, faster, and more, the solar potential in Texas is enough to power the world twice over. And in New York, New York State, there are more solar installations today than there are taxi cabs in New York City. So, kind of some fun facts. So the top 10 solar states really depends on kind of what you're looking at. And I apologize that this is a bit of an eye chart, so I will translate some of it for you in the back. So if you're looking at number of jobs in the industry, you've got California at number 1, Arizona, New Jersey, Massachusetts, New York, Texas, Florida, Ohio, Colorado, North Carolina. A pretty interesting and diverse mix. I would never put those states into one category collectively. Price declines. Wisconsin, of all places, Minnesota, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., North Carolina, Florida, Hawaii, Texas, Georgia. Cumulative capacity installed, again, California, Arizona, New Jersey, North Carolina, Nevada, Massachusetts, Hawaii, Colorado, New York, New Mexico. And percentage of new electrical capacity from solar, Arizona, Illinois, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Missouri, Vermont, Washington, D.C., Tennessee, Oregon, and Hawaii. So really, we're seeing growth in all markets across all states. Now, you'll notice our dear beloved state of Utah is not on that list, but we're getting there. So not only is the solar market growing significantly, but solar is now in the money for a lot of these big businesses, and they are seeing it not only as a good sort of PR thing, but a long-term price hedge against volatility and against uncertainty and against rising utility prices. So you may recognize some of these names on here: Walmart, Costco, Bed Bath & Beyond, Kohl's, IKEA, the list goes on. There is huge investments being made nationwide by a lot of these big companies. And we should really be thanking them because they're in effect having a bulk purchase effect on the pricing. And just a few more perspectives to put on these numbers. So total installed capacity in the U.S. to date is 12.1 gigawatts, which is enough electricity to power 1.76 million average Utah homes each year for 25 to 30 or more years, depending on how long those systems last, which typically is more than 30 years. And we are also seeing some huge upswings in concentrating solar, which is more of the utility scale solar, using a slightly different technology, and they're illustrated on this slide. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on this, but that sector is growing as well. And Nevada has, that's this one up here, has one of the largest in the country. So Utah. So we have seen enormous growth relative to our non-existent market just a decade ago. And we continue to see growth in the residential and commercial sectors primarily. We do not have any meaningful utility scale projects in Utah yet. There is one small project down in St. George, but that's kind of a hybrid, so I wouldn't really classify it as such. There's a lot of talk about utility scale projects coming online. You may have seen it in the news. But in all likelihood, any utility scale projects developed in Utah will likely be going to California, not to Utah. Just a couple of things to put on your radar. So Utah Clean Energy has been working in the policy realm over the course of this decade. And in 2008, we worked to improve our net metering policy, which is a foundational policy for the distributed generation. And in 2010, we worked to allow third-party financing for public entities and state entities and local governments and nonprofits. And certainly throughout this time frame, there were incentives through the stimulus funding. About this time, those incentives kind of went away. And then right in this time frame, our utility, Rocky Mountain Power, our main utility, I should say, Rocky Mountain Power offered quite a significantly increased solar incentive program, mostly for the commercial sector and non-residential sector. And price declines were occurring through this time, so that's why we're seeing that sharp uptick in those last few years. We certainly expect that to continue. And what does that mean for jobs here in Utah? According to a recent report by the Solar Foundation, 910 solar jobs, and that's across multiple sectors, including installation, sales and distribution, manufacturing, and there's about 59 or so solar companies in Utah. So we're getting there. You know, this is starting to be a meaningful portion of our economy. Okay, so that's kind of our solar market 101, where we are. One thing to note, Solyndra. Bankruptcies happen all the time in the business community and very rarely get any attention. Solyndra happened to be an investment that our Department of Energy made with taxpayer dollars, which is, unfortunately, they didn't read some of the latest market trend reports indicating that solar PV prices were actually going to come down significantly. So for those who may be hearing, well, Solyndra is indicative of the fact that the solar industry is falling flat on its face, please let those folks know that that is not the case. It was one example of a bad example, but we certainly have a robust and growing industry across the sectors, and certainly the PV world is growing rapidly. Okay, so that brings me to the solar simplified portion of this presentation. So last year, our organization was getting calls and emails about solar. You know, how do I do it? Where do I go? Who do I look for? How do I trust the person that I'm talking to? How do I know how big the system needs to be? And on and on and on. We recognize that solar, although the sun comes up predictably every day, the process of putting solar on your home or business is not simple. So we wanted to address that with an online tool, which we hope all of you can use and share, and we've aptly named it Solar Simplified. It's one-stop shop. So the idea is you can go to this website, hopefully, and get most, if not all, of your answers to your solar questions. We've also made it for as many audiences as possible. So we've got homeowners, businesses, contractors, local governments, and utilities. It pretty much covers most of them. Now, is this going to have all your answers? No. But our hope is that it'll educate enough of the people going to it that you'll be able to know what questions you need to ask when you call up a contractor. So we also have a Find a Contractor. We have Facts and Facts. We have the latest and greatest on incentives and financing, and so on. So we tried to break it down. 10 simple steps to solar. You know, like what everyone wants in their life. 10 simple steps to anything. This is on all the magazines on every shelf. 10 simple steps. So we tried to digest it for you. To the extent you are motivated economically to do solar, we've also provided a return on investment calculator. So note that I didn't say a payback calculator, because very, very few things that we ever buy give us a payback. Our cars? Psh, no way. I wish. Let's see, our clothes? No, usually not. Pets? No, not really. Children's education? Maybe, if they're so kind. But return on investment is something that we can conceptualize, and it's the terminology that the business community uses to evaluate investments. How much am I going to receive in terms of today's value and long-term value on this investment? So you can plug in your annual electric usage, you can plug in the size of your system if you know it, or you can just check I don't know. You can plug in your system cost, or you can say I don't know, and plug in your utility. And we've specifically made this for Utah. So your utilities, your costs per kilowatt hour, we've tried to make it as reflective of this market as possible. I will say, unfortunately, for the businesses in the room, I see a few of you, we do not have this yet for the business community. And the reason is, the business world is just different. And there's a lot of elements in that world that cannot be simplified because you got 7 to 20 bills that you're trying to levelize. You've got demand charges, you've got a whole slew of issues. So to the extent that we're trying to simplify it, we're working on it, but it's not there yet. The other thing we've done is we've partnered with Salt Lake City and their mapping department and created a really cool solar overlay on Salt Lake County. So you can actually plug in your address, and then you can press the solar overlay button, and you can see, okay, oh, there's my roof. Oh, look at that, it's bright red. That means I have good solar resource. So this is a good start. It doesn't mean that it's the end-all be-all, because, for example, if you've cut down a tree or you've added an addition, we're using Google Maps, so it's only as updated as a Google map can be. But the hope is it's relatively helpful. And then you can go in and you can draw a little polygon, and it'll give you an estimate of the system size and the typical output based on the square footage of that house. Now, a lot of folks are really keen on solar, and then they go and talk to their local government or their HOA, and they get presented with either a brick wall or a really shiny screen door. So what we've also tried to do here is create a toolbox for local governments that will ultimately, hopefully, streamline and simplify the process. So we have a zoning toolbox with best practices from across the country and case studies of various communities who have figured out how to accommodate aesthetics and planning and setbacks, etc., as it relates to solar. And the one motivator for us to do this is, even though our costs have come down significantly in the United States and they will continue to decline, we are seeing that compared to another more robust market, Germany, solar market, we have, there we go, soft costs, effectively, administration, red tape, local government, variation. There are over 18,000 people or entities across this country that have some level of decision-making authority over a solar system getting installed in a neighborhood or in a community. And the idea is, if we can cut these soft costs, we get an even better deal and we get even more solar. So the zoning element, the permitting element, that's where we are really trying to hone in. Because you can go from South Salt Lake to North Salt Lake And every single one of those permitting officials and zoning officials are going to have a different perspective on how to do solar and what's allowed and how much time it's going to take and what fee they're going to charge and who has to do the review and what engineer has to stamp off on it. And oh my heavens, red tape. Why? Solar technology does not change when you walk it across the street and your district changes. So why are our regulations changing so significantly? So the idea behind this permitting toolbox is to actually give local governments the tools and resources at their disposal so that they don't have to take the time and energy, so they don't have to do the research. There is an actual solar simplified permitting checklist and permitting application that was developed with a national process that local governments in Utah can start using. Easy, you can open up the box and start using it. It's ready to go. And all of that is available on this site. So if you know local governments who are interested, or if you encountered slow, arduous processes with local governments, make them aware of this tool. Any questions at this point? Okay. So the next piece in the Solar Simplified story is sort of the financing element. And this is an ever-evolving piece, and it's an ever-evolving process, but we've found a really cool model that has worked very well in 2 communities, and it's effectively the Groupon model for solar. So you basically get a community, Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County were our pilot. You go out to the community as a whole and call to the citizens and say, hey, who's interested in being on a steering committee to help us get a discount on solar panels for the next 6 to 8 months? You convene the steering committee. The steering committee puts together an RFP, request for proposals, goes out to the street and requests those proposals from the solar community at large. They get bids. They make a selection based on the cost competitiveness and other values that the community has. And they select 1 or 2 or more contractors. In this case, it was 1. And then they say, okay, for a limited time, this community, anyone in this community who's eligible and has a solar-ready roof can access discount pricing on a solar installation. You get community buy-in, you get people telling their neighbors, their friends, their family, and it's a tiered discount. So the more people who sign up, the greater the discount for everyone. So in Salt Lake City, when we did this, we got about 300 people took the solar survey, and 64 of them, so about 1 in 4, ultimately ended up choosing to go solar through this process. And they all saved on average about 40% on their solar installations before any incentives. So as the renewable energy community is trying to wean itself off of its limited incentives, this can be a really compelling model. And I can't remember who this morning was saying that the fossil, it was in a different presentation. Somebody was saying that the fossil industry is kicking back on the idea of having their subsidies revoked and put in another pot. And yet the solar industry and wind industry are expected to, in a matter of 2 decades, become completely off incentives and subsidies. Well, we're committed to doing that as a whole. We want to get there. We can't do it alone, and we need to make it a little bit more mainstream before that's going to happen, but it's very much on the horizon. This kind of a model throughout the country could be a really compelling model to make that happen. So after we worked in Salt Lake County, we went over to Summit County. We did the same thing. Summit County beat Salt Lake County, and not only that, but they installed 500% more solar than they had ever seen before. And so this was Summit County in the years leading up to the bulk purchase program, Summit Community Solar. This was last year. So it kind of worked. And this is a cool graph because it really shows that this is a community-based effort. This is a sustainable model. It's people talking to people, getting people excited about something that's good for their community, something that people can get behind. And, friend, family, neighbor, biggest source of how people heard about this. Local radio was the second biggest source. Local newspaper, third biggest source. So this is really a community-oriented model that has a lot of promise. And for those who care about what solar actually does, 330 kilowatts was the amount of solar installed in Summit County, and over the 25-year lifetime, they will that amount of solar will avoid 20.8 million pounds of CO2, sorry, I'm reading and talking, that never works out. That's the equivalent emissions of over 1 million gallons of gas, and so on and so forth. So, good deal. Oh, actually, that was the one that I wanted to read. Those homeowners will save about $1.37 million on their electricity bills. So that's not too shabby. This is just an interesting case study, and it kind of leads into my next point. Gentleman in Salt Lake City, really committed, gung-ho guy, wanted to completely revamp his home, and he did a complete energy efficiency retrofit. He revamped the whole interior and exterior, actually increased the size of his home, and managed to save energy long-term. He's also got enough solar in his home to power his electric vehicle. So we see solar as one important element of our energy future, but as we are grappling with our air quality challenges and grappling with what the future of our energy system is going to look like, the compelling trifecta of solar and electric vehicles and energy storage is very, very much on the near-term horizon, and one that we should all be looking closely at. And to that end, I'm pretty sure that our legislature has, if not today or tomorrow, next week, will very likely pass out a pretty significant increase to the incentive for electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids. So that will become available to you all, and including leasing options. So start your shopping. So moving into the mainstream, what are kind of the key challenges/opportunities that solar is going to encounter? Well, as I mentioned before, this notion of a sort of community-centric energy, net metering and distributed solar and shared renewables are going to be three key elements moving forward, and not all of them are easy. You may have heard about net metering and this fee on solar customers here in Utah. Raise your hand if you've read something about that. A few, okay. So that battle, that challenge is going on across the country right now. States and utilities are grappling with this because, in essence, distributed solar represents a very disruptive technology in the sense that it disrupts a business model that's been around for hundreds of years, in the same way that cell phones disrupted Ma Bell's business model. And we are going through that transition right now. And this sort of trend towards fees, I think, is a very short-sighted perspective on how we can really handle that long-term. If we're going to be honest with ourselves, we need to look at utility models as a whole. What does the utility of the future look like? What does the customer of the future look like? And what does the community of the future look like? And it is not, I'm not talking about like a future where, Cylons exist. I'm talking about the future that our children and our grandchildren will be living in. So today is the time when we should be having those conversations. And are they easy conversations? No. Are they absolutely critical and imperative? Yes. I'm pleased to say that the conversation is happening more and more in the policy and regulatory realm. And I'm also pleased to say that this year, during the legislative session, we were faced with what I would call a very bad bill on net metering that would have taken a very good statute that's been in place for close to a decade and turned it on its head and mandated the fee that's been proposed before the Public Service Commission. Fortunately, many, many partners stepped up to the plate, Utah Clean Energy being one of them, sat down and had some good hard conversations with Rocky Mountain Power and others about how to really make that policy less detrimental and more forward-thinking. And we ended up with a policy that neutralized the bad parts and actually opened up the door to a conversation that will allow our Public Service Commission and our utility to start looking at solar in a more meaningful way. So from bad bill to good bill, overnight, not quite. Energy storage and electric vehicles can be one of the same, and in fact there's a lot of research being done with respect to how electric vehicles can play a role in storing excess energy during the nighttime and then providing it during the day. Are we there yet? No, but a lot of stuff is happening there and it's pretty exciting. Net zero homes, absolutely we should be encouraging this. Net zero buildings, absolutely we should be encouraging this. But again, it all kind of comes back to this notion of how utilities are making money and how they're giving their profits to their shareholders. We need to get away from the sale of electricity as the point of that profit and towards a better, less contentious model. Financing mechanisms, third-party financing, leasing, bulk purchase, property says clean energy. All of these pieces are starting to fall into place in different forms in different states. I'm pleased to say that we got a lot of good foundations happening here in Utah, and these are also going to take a few more years of conversation before we're fully there. I alluded to earlier this kind of notion of the future of incentives. How much longer do we want to be relying on incentives to make solar and wind and other technologies really viable? I think that we can get there without them, and we need to have those conversations as well. And then sort of this notion of tackling soft costs. This is one of the biggest challenges facing the country. Because the harder it is to get solar permitted, the harder it is to get it installed, the faster people are walking away saying, screw it. You know, if it was that hard to get a permit to build a new home, you think we'd have so many homes going up in the valley? No, we figured that out. So maybe we can start figuring that out a little faster. So those are just some of the questions, concepts, challenges, opportunities. I know I've really glossed over a lot of them, but the reality is each of these has about an hour's worth of discussion to them. But I would love to entertain for the last however many minutes we have, 20 minutes, any of your questions, any of your frustrations, any of your, I'd really like to see this, blah, blah, blah. So, start at me. Yes? So yes, what our next community bulk purchase project is going to be. And I'm pleased to say that it's actually going to be in partnership with the University of Utah. I shouldn't say that here, huh? So the University of Utah has actually indicated that they're keen to replicate this model. And how it will work is basically the university will be the convener of a group of citizens and faculty and staff. And they will go through the same process. And then the bulk purchase will be available to U of U faculty, staff, students, and community. So the parameters of that project will be announced. Look for something, in the April to May timeframe. Yes?
Okay. How close to the power purchase agreements do you think we are, and why do you think we're so resistant to that?
So the question was, how close are we to enabling power purchase agreements, and why are we so resistant to it here? So I will say, we have power purchase agreements right now for public facilities. So local governments, state governments, nonprofits, people who need a third-party investor to take advantage of tax credits for them because they cannot. We're working on a bill right now that will add military and federal facilities to that list as well. And we are ensuring that that bill is going to be reauthorized for the next 7 years. It was set to expire next year. So to the extent we've been having that conversation, I can say that we're moving in the right direction. There is a lot of resistance from utilities with respect to enabling third parties to come in and provide residential and commercial power purchase agreements. The irony, though, in that resistance is that leases, which are in effect similar, contractually they're different, but in effect they're the same kind of deal, those are allowable in those markets. So I think that at the core of the concern is a bigger concern relating to two things. One, sort of this business model concept that I've discussed, and sort of unleashing the slew of residential and commercial customers that would likely flock to that type of a model. And then the second issue is sort of this concept of we have a monopoly utility. they have a monopoly service territory, and like most monopolies, they kind of like that, and they don't really want to open up the doors to other service providers to come into their service territory. So they will see it as kind of like a deregulation, which in the utility world is a bad term. But I do think that it's something that more and more, certainly more and more policymakers are looking at, and more businesses and certainly residents are calling for. So I don't think that it's that far off. Any other questions? Yes?
How close is the state to offering the incentive to
Gotcha. So the Recon Power Incentive Program is a limited program, and I will say that we went from a nominal, minuscule program of 500 kilowatts over 5 years to a significant expansion to 60 megawatts over the next 5 years. So relatively speaking, or 60,000 kilowatts to put it in perspective. So that program expansion occurred just last year after much debate and much analysis. So the fact that we went from 0 to 600% is a huge win for Utah. The fact that it exists in its sort of smaller form relative to our potential is something that we in the utility regulatory arena are really pushing on, because we actually showed that incentive is a cost-effective program for the utility and for ratepayers, which means that for every dollar invested by the ratepayers who are paying for it, you get $1.63 in benefits. So it's actually part of the utility's cost-effective requirement, and we're hoping to show through more analysis and more utility planning processes that they can do much more and have it be a cost-effective resource for them. And to that end, that we think that dovetails nicely with how do we get utilities in on this distributed generation world, because it can be part of their business model. So I guess to answer your question, give it a few years, and we may see more growth there. Any other burning questions from this really hyperactive audience? Yes.
As a small homeowner, it's solar contribution.
So as a small, you mean you have a small home?
Yeah.
Okay. So have you done everything you can with respect to energy efficiency? And have you, let's see, well, you could buy an electric car and then oversize your system and then plug your electric car in, and then you're not paying for anything. I have a small house too, and certainly to run the numbers, it's a little hard. But the nice thing with solar is that it is modular. So you could do, a small system to offset some of your energy usage. The other nice thing about a small house is the prospect of including a battery backup system to serve most of your energy needs in the event of a power outage is much more cost effective. So to examine sort of those options, but the reality is you might just have to wait for the UVU Community Solar Program and then get a discount. If you're in Salt Lake County, or I think they're going to do Salt Lake County, Davis County, and one other county. Yes?
You might have said this earlier, I just said something about what's the ROI now on a 3 kilowatt system for a house?
So the ROI now on a average 4 kilowatt system for an average home is first year ROI is in the range of about 7%, and long term, 25-year ROI is in the range of 135%. You can go run those numbers. Were you here when I talked about the solar calculator? I'll just run back so you can check that out. So we have a website called solarsimplified.org, and you can actually plug and chug your situation into this really simple calculator. So you have your average kilowatt hour usage, sort of the system size you might be considering, and the price per watt. If you don't know any of those things, they'll default to just standard, so you can go and check those out.
Let's say payback period.
So what I said earlier is, payback and return on investment. Ultimately, we'd like to speak in terms of return on investment. So this does not speak in terms of payback, but you can figure it out. Yeah. So the nice thing about this is it does not include tax incentives. Yes. So, and we purposely did that because we didn't want to mislead people who said, oh, I got this great number off this website, and then they go, and, oh, I'm not eligible for tax credit. So it is not including tax incentives. I think, though, that there is at the bottom, and I don't have the screenshot for that, at the bottom it does show a comparison with incentives, without incentives. So you can run those numbers too. Oh yes, 30%. And I should also say that the 30% tax incentive for solar is set to expire in 2016. So there's a lot of sort of wait and see thinking with respect to solar, but in reality, I would wait less and see more, because we've got about a 2-year time span where we know we're going to have a 30% tax incentive, and that could go away after 2016, and we're kind of counting on it not being there. So your investment today has, much more value relative to in 3 years. Yes.
Like my own solar system on my own, I figured the ROI is going to be in the 6 to 7 year category, but I did capture the same tax incentives.
Right. So the gentleman, for those who can't hear, said his home system is about a 6 to 7 year payback or ROI, and so I think without incentives, you can kind of count on about a 15-year, with incentives about 6 to 7 year. Yes.
Plans to expand that solar overlay to all of Utah?
Yes, but it would require more money. So the reason that we have it for Salt Lake County is actually kind of coincidental because of the Olympics. They did a bunch of LiDAR stuff for the Olympics for security purposes, and then the GIS guys with Salt Lake City were able to kind of tag on to that and do some cool solar calculations relative to that. But we don't have LiDAR data for the entire state, and LiDAR data requires significant flyover and technology capabilities. So hopefully one day, but NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, has some decent solar maps that kind of show, generally speaking, what our solar resource is. But right out of the chute, I can tell you, Utah has an amazing solar resource. Even on a day like today, a system will generate energy. It's a common misconception that any cloud cover will shut it down entirely. A day like today, with good direct and indirect insolation, will generate. Not as much as it could, but it'll still generate energy. Yes?
Can you estimate what is the resale value on a home with solar, how much you get out, say 5 years, something like that?
I'm really glad you asked that. I didn't include that. So there's a really cool tool, another cool tool, called PV Value. And if you just Google that, you can find it. So Cynthia National Labs has created an online tool, usable and free to anyone, that actually has looked at several markets to determine the answer to that question. So you can actually plug in your zip code, and it'll calculate based on a bunch of the market real estate information that it captures from another database, and it'll turn that out for you. On average, the general rule of thumb is about $6,000 per kilowatt installed in value. So that's pretty good. That's granite countertops and hot tubs. They give you similar, maybe more, but we like to think of solar as just another check mark on the real estate box that does provide a value added proposition for your home. And that's been substantiated with several home sales in California, where we saw the market is huge. So it's not just hearsay. We're actually basing this on what's happening in that market. And if you show your future home buyer your electricity bills, that's a pretty compelling story right there. And to that end, I just want to mention, so with the proposal to impose a fee on solar customers, for those who are really interested and concerned about that, please stay tuned and tune in with Utah Clean Energy, because that rate case is going to be playing out over the next 7 to 8 months. So in the late spring, early summer time frame, we're going to be diving real deep on that, doing a lot of analysis, doing a lot of testimony before the Public Service Commission, and really digging into those numbers and doing everything we can to prevent an unjustified fee on solar customers without numbers to back it up. So stay tuned. All right, well, we got one more? So the gentleman's asking about the liability with snow slide off, and that is an issue for sure. You want to make sure you're paying attention to that. So a lot of the Summit Community Solar customers had to address that because of the snowfall and steeper roofs up there. Most solar contractors are very familiar with that issue, doing business in Utah. There are systems that you can, like little trays effectively, that you can put in place at the bottom so you can catch that snowfall. There are means by which you can effectively remove that snow before it piles up. So it's an issue, but it's not a huge one. It's not a game changer. So TRA Snow and Sun is a company based out of American Fork, and they actually specialize in just that. So you can check in with it. TRA Snow and Sun. All right, well, I would suggest you all go run around. No, thank you. You've been very attentive. You've been great to ask lots of great questions. I will be here for another few minutes. I do have to run pretty quickly to get back to the valley for another meeting, but please let me know if you have any questions, and you can also wait for it, email me or give me a call. So thank you guys so much.